The James Show Podcast.
Not my idea. This is an idea that comes from Matt Walsh. Are you familiar with Matt Walsh? He did Am I Racist? What is a Woman? That's sort of his bit. So this was something, and I think he said this before. So I don't know if this came from something he said like today or yesterday, but I saw it this morning. And here's the theory, at least.
We need drug testing and weight testing for anyone receiving SNAP. We need a system that does not subsidize the grocery bills of 45 million people for the indefinite future with no time limit or restriction. And beyond that point, if the food stamp program is going to continue to exist at all, which I'm not convinced it should, it needs to have standards, strict standards. It needs to have a reason to exist. And for the benefit of every taxpayer and the millions of obese, profoundly ungrateful people they're feeding, we should end this particular economic activity. And in its place, we should encourage food stamp recipients to engage in some actual activity, like, getting a job or going for a walk around the block. Hold them to some standards.
So what do you think about that? Should there be a weight limit for food stamps? Now, the obvious attachment here is if you're 400 pounds, you probably don't need assistance with more nutrition. If you're 300 pounds, it's almost like, hey, if anything, we need to be discouraging you from additional calories. At some point, the food stamps aren't even helping you as much as they're killing you. Some things that you've probably suspected about food stamps that I've had to Google in past shows and turned out to be true. Yes, the people on food stamps are actually more likely to be obese than the taxpayers who are funding the food stamps. Isn't that a beautiful irony? Also, that number, 45 million. If you want to just round it out here, that's about, 15% of the population? What percentage of the population you think deserves food stamps? Because if it's 100%, then it's not a food assistance program. Then you have just socialized food. And if it's for half the country, you feel a little silly for someone who's making, who's living seriously in the middle of society, has to get subsidized by the other half of society. So this is just for the poorest of the poor. But 15% of us get it? Doesn't that sound like a lot? Well, actually, it is a lot. Federal spending on the SNAP program has doubled since COVID. In 2019, if you look at the chart, it looks like about $62, $63 billion. Now we're above $120 billion for the last couple of years here. What happened in the last, 5, 6 years? Are we twice as poor as we were then? No, actually, we're richer. Our GDP's bigger. Our stock market's at all-time high. The unemployment market's doing pretty damn good. So did we just have an influx of poor people? No, they relaxed the standards, the work standards under COVID. And if you relax it, you had the same amount of poor people here. Just about 15 million more got on the rolls than were on previously. Okay, so this isn't about feeding the poorest of the poor or the needy. It's just we'll expand the roles, and whoever qualifies, as many of them who want to get on it, get on it. Yeah, that's how it happens. Now, this addresses a couple of problems that a lot of people have with food stamps. If we put some standards on it, he mentioned drug test and the weight limit. Now, drug tests, you're finding that if you have the luxury to spend money on drugs, that's fine. Well, why don't you have a Netflix test too? If you have money to spend on streaming service subscriptions, then the taxpayer shouldn't be subsidizing your food. You should be spending your Netflix money on, a cheeseburger. So I don't know if I necessarily like the idea that there's tests, but it's really hard to argue against the weight test. I mean, if you're absolutely huge, and I'm not talking about overweight. I'm overweight, you're overweight, everyone's overweight. I'm talking about the morbidly obese. I'm talking about if someone comes into the food stamp office looking like a ham planet, they should be able to get turned away. And I don't think that's mean. If someone was addicted to heroin, they want heroin really bad. They may think they need heroin. They're going to go out and they're going to fuss and they're fighting. They may steal and fight and commit crimes to get heroin. But is giving them heroin helping them, or is it killing them? 800-288-9227. Let's ask Larry in Paris. Hey, Larry, you're on WBAP.
Hey, how you doing today? Hey, I just had a comment. About 10 years ago, I had congestive heart failure. I managed to come out of that and went back to work. I was 55. You know, these SNAP benefits, you don't get nothing when you've worked and something happens to you. You want to talk about restrictions. At that time, you made over $480 a month. You didn't get nothing. So I don't know. To me, it's just a supplement for people who don't work, because I've went through it, and being a man that worked his whole life, you ain't getting nothing.
Right. And look, what you're describing here isn't a problem with charity. It's a problem with government charity. If you go to a church and they do and we're running hunger programs through churches, you know what they do? Because me and Miss Parker have both worked with our churches.
I had to do that myself.
They have to fill out like applications. They have to get interviewed by someone that works for the church, and they have to make sure that you're not spending this on drugs, and you're not just running around being a floozy, and you're not buying stupid stuff with it. You know, there's a little bit of oversight that the government just doesn't care about whatsoever.
Well, they don't care about me unless I'm working, paying taxes. Once something happens to you and you're a man that's worked, or a woman their whole life, you go and try to get some assistance to get on your feet. It don't happen, man. There's so much stipulations, and it's ungodly. I mean, whoever thinks that a household could make $500 a month and not need help? But that's just the reality of it. As of me, I'm a God-fearing man. God got me through it. He'll get me through the next trouble.
Well, I did a bit on my radio show like 10 years ago. I think seriously it was 2015. And we did a little experiment where we looked at the situation between myself and Miss Parker. We had just had our fourth kid, and we were looking at Miss Parker, how much assistance she would qualify for if she would only kick me out of the house and divorce me. So it was sort of like the dump James dividend. And it started out, and this was in 2015. The numbers would be much bigger for 2025. It would start out, I think it was $683 worth of food stamps is what she qualified for right off the top. She qualified for, I don't remember all this off the top of my head, but it was a few $100s in just straight up cash. She could have gotten, I think it was $1,200, up to $1,200 in a Section 8 voucher, or it might have been $1,500 if she actually lived in the Orleans parish. But when we added it all up, I was only slightly more valuable to her living in the house than her kicking me out. And, you know, I'm not a fry cook. I don't make a ton of money. Being a radio host isn't very lucrative. But the incentive for her to kick me out was brutal. So I had to start being nicer to Miss Parker after that.
We should encourage food stamp recipients to engage in some actual activity, like, getting a job or going for a walk around the block. Hold them to some standards.
You know, he's making some solid points there, but I don't think that's the fix. In fact, I don't think there is a fix for a food stamp system like that. I understand why he would want to do it. But do you understand how much better the private sector alternatives are to the food stamp system? You want them to eat food. You don't want them to waste it on sodas and junk foods and Little Debbies and Twinkies. Do what the food banks do. Look what the food banks do. What do they hand them? Food. And if you hand them the actual food, you can control whether or not they're getting Dr. Pepper with it, or if they're getting Twinkies with it, or if they're getting an organic sweet potato. Yeah, I don't know if this can be fixed. I understand where his heart's at. I think it's ridiculous to be subsidizing the food for someone who weighs 400 pounds. But I think we just got to get rid of the whole thing, period, point blank, end of story. I'm not sure this ugly beast can be fixed. This is Garrett in Dallas. You're on WBAP.
Hi, how you doing, buddy? I got to agree with him. If it's going to continue, there should be standards. But say whether it's a drug test or a recording of the weight, somebody's got to pay for that. According to Google, I mean, your average drug test is costing $30 a piece. You times that times 45 million. I mean, who's going to subsidize that?
All right. So what about the weight then? You could just have a scale right there at the office. That doesn't cost anything.
Right. Who's going to record it for it to be accurate?
Well, the same guy who processes the paperwork.
Sort of clinic.
Well, yeah,
right.
but
yes, sir.
So it just be part of the process by which they sign up for them.
Absolutely. I could understand that.
Yeah.
I can understand that.
Now, the drug thing would be expensive. The weight thing, it wouldn't be expensive. I just think we should scrap it all together. I get where the people's heart's at, and it does seem like a good idea compared to not having any kind of standards on it. But, yeah, you're bringing up some decent complications here that make me just say, just scrap it. Just scrap it all together. Because, I mean, look.
Right. Absolutely.
If we turn it over to the private sector, one of the advantages is they do have standards, but those standards cost. If a private sector charity wants to do a drug test, it'll cost about $30 a person. And so I don't know. I think some of that would be acceptable because you'd probably be saving more money in the long run, being able to deny people or have people to be a little more productive and get off the system and not be on it so long. But no, you're bringing up valid arguments there, Garrett. Let's go to Daniel and Kaufman. You're on WBAP.
Hey, James, I got something better. Instead of giving, a family $800 a month in food stamps, if there's 3 family members in that household, you get 2,000 calories. So when they swipe that card, it's not money system that they're burning up money. They're allotted so many calories. So if they want to buy a bag of chips and a pack of oatmeal cream pies, then they're not going to eat for the rest of the week. That's on them. That's their decision.
All right.
What do you think about that? How would that work out?
I don't know. How would you do that? So every grocery store now has to have a database system that includes the calorie count on all their items?
Well, it's going to have some kind of way to keep track of it because when they swipe that card, they got a certain amount of money on there.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking as like from an IT standpoint, you could do that through the UPC code symbol. You'd have to add another field to your database array that included calorie counts. I don't like it being on a card. If you want to control their calorie count or you want to control what they do and don't eat, I think you do what the food pantries do. And instead of handing them money or a debit card, you hand them a box of food. I think that's the only way you can really control it. Because even if you do have the calorie deficit counter, whatever it is on there, a lot of people are going to do what they do with the cards already. It's like, hey, I've got $800 on this card. I'll sell it to you for $400. And so I've got 8,000 calories on this card. I'll sell it to you for $50, and then they'll still go get the Twinkies.
That's the flawed part of the system. That's the flawed part of the system from the beginning.
Agree. Well, and totally correct, which makes me say I understand the need or the want to put standards on it, but I think we just have to scrap the whole thing. I don't think it is savable. Thank you, Daniel.
Yes, sir.
Marie in McKinney, you're on WBAP.
Hey, James. Thanks for taking my call again. So I am 100% not in favor of the SNAP program. I remember back in the 60s, you can age me right now, when I was a child, there may have been food stamps, but it was not prolific. Back in those days, people had the commodities. The communities, about once a month, they would have a open pantry, similar to what you're talking about with the food bank.
Yeah, and that's where we got government cheese from, right?
Right. Cheese, flour, eggs, basics. You can cook and you can survive on the commodities. And they were free and they were given out, in portions to families, but none of the Dr. Pepper and none of the
Well, here's what I don't like about the commodities pantry. How did the government come to be in possession of such vast amounts of cheese and flour?
Well, they have to buy it.
Yeah. So they ended up owning this stuff because they were subsidizing something, which I already disagree with. Is because they were doing, protectionist policies for some preferred industry. So it's probably the senator and the Congress people from Wisconsin that did the cheese subsidies. And it's, Iowa does the first vote in every presidential election cycle. So we're always throwing a ton of farm subsidies at middle America. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we shouldn't have had the cheese to begin with. That's the thing I don't like about the commodities program.
Just another option, though. Thanks, James.
Thank you very much. I'm glad people remember some of that. Because my only time I saw government cheese is in Don't Be a Menace in the Hood, or when you're in South Central or something, whatever. The Marlon Wayans show where he was showing the foreplay and he melted the government cheese on her foot or something. It was stupid. This is Wynn in Capel. You're on WBAP.
Hi, thanks for taking my call, James. I'm an old guy, and I was working in the 70s under Nixon, and in order to curb inflation and costs of food, they froze prices across the board and wages. So pretty much that stopped inflation. I know I wasn't happy about it because I was due a raise just before he did that and held me back, but heck, if you can't raise prices and you can't raise wages, that ought to help people buy stuff at the grocery.
You're advocating price and wage controls?
Hello?
Yeah, you're in favor of wage and price controls?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not.
Well,
okay.
I wasn't when it affected me, but looking back on it, it was a pretty good idea.
So there have only been 2 times in American history, or in the last 100 years that we've been driving automobiles, that Americans have had to wait in line all across the country for gasoline because there was a shortage. And that was the 2 times we tried to do price controls. Price controls lead to shortages. It's an economic law. It's not a theory. It's not a hypothesis. It's not a postulate. It's something that can't be avoided. So if you want something to be scarce, put price controls on it.
Well, you're right, but it did work.
Did it work?
And I lived
waiting in line for gas is working?
I lived through both of those, and part of the problem was that, once there's a shortage on something, people begin to hoard. That's the problem with that.
Yeah, I'm still against price controls. Yeah, you survived it. You also survived like the 50% inflation that the 70s brought the dollar. But other than being denied a raise and having to wait for gas prices and the worst inflation that I think have ever had in this country, the 70s, great economic policies. They did really well. I think the problem with this is it feels like a social issue. This feels like a moral issue, maybe even a religious issue or some sort of societal altruism issue, but it follows the same laws of economics to where without even knowing the intimate details of how this program works, you do know that it's a government program. And so the incentive for the government program is perverse compared to the private sector charity. The private sector charity seeks to get you back on your feet. If you come to them with your hands out, if you come to them at the bottom of the barrel, just had the worst day of your life, they want to feed you, of course. They want to take care of your immediate needs. But they also want to put together a system where in 6 months, 9 months, a year from now, you don't need their help anymore. Why? Because if they don't help all these people get off of their butts and get back into the productive side of the ledger, they're going to run out of resources and they're not going to be able to help anybody. They want to help as many people as possible, so they need to get them back on their feet and get them out. Conversely, the incentive structure for the government is completely the opposite. If you come to them with your hand out and they don't help you, they're not going to run out of money. They can just go ask for more money. And the new people that come in next year, they add to their roles, and now your program's twice as big as it was the year before. And then the next year, it'll be 3 times as big. And then pretty soon, you're not overseeing a small little dinky side fringe program. You have a budget that's in the billions. In fact, the more people you can trap and calcify into these poverty programs, the more powerful and resource rich you become. You have the opposite incentive. You want to keep people in that program for their entire lives if you can. That's what's good for you, the government program, the bureaucrat. But it's just the opposite for the private sector charity. It's no accident that these aren't temporary benefits. They'll sell them to you. It's just a supplemental temporary system, temporary assistance for needy families. No, that's not their incentive. Their incentive is to keep you in that program as long as possible. And that's how they measure their success. Is the longer they can keep as many people fail as possible. That's how they measure their success. Not an accident. Yeah, I don't think it is fixable. I think you just have to scrap it and turn it all back over to charity, just like we did for all of American history up until LBJ. This is Evan in the Colony. You're on WBAP.
Hey, James, thanks for taking my call. And I agree with everything you just said, especially the politics side. I don't think we should have the program. But if it's going to stay, I don't think you can fix it. I agree with you on that. And I don't know how you motivate sluggards to go out and get a job. So just let them keep doing what they're doing. If they want to eat themselves to an early death, let them thin the herd. I mean, actions have consequences, so just let them keep doing what they're doing. I don't like my tax dollars being used for that, but just let them eat themselves to an early grave.
Right. That's an accelerationist policy. That's you're the first person to say that on today's show. Thank you very much, Evan. Good points.
Thanks.
I like that. John, Dallas, you're on WBAP. What do you think?
Hey, yeah. So I think you kind of have more accountability. So, you flex spending account to choose for medical expenses. When you go to check out, if it's not a qualifying product, you can't get it. You have to pay for it out of pocket. So I think you kind of keep track of it like that, load, load the grocery stores those products that are, in their system that are flex spending account or SNAP eligible.
But you just want to have, you don't want to blacklist a few items. You want to have a white list of a few things they're allowed to buy. And so it sounds like you're describing the WIC system.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
that would be better than the food stamp system.
Like
I totally agree with that.
Right.
Yeah, I like the sound of that, John.
And
I have no pushback on that. I mean, I'd still prefer for the whole program to go away, but what you just described is better than what we have now. I'll totally agree with that. So good point. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Janelle, you're on WBAP from Fort Worth. What do you think?
I am personally in favor for the SNAP program. I think I have a little bit more compassion because I know every situation is different. Yeah, there are people who are taking advantage of the system, but there are also, especially single moms, we have the elderly, the disability. Some of these people just absolutely cannot work. And I think a calorie deficit is the craziest thing I've ever heard for so many reasons. I do think that there should be guidelines and restrictions to a degree. I don't think you should be on this for generations to come. But I think to eradicate it completely, I mean, we're about to see what's going to happen on November 1st. This impacts so many people personally, and also I am blessed. I don't mind that my taxes are going to that because my taxes are also going to a bunch of other things that are wasteful. But if it's going to help a large group of people, I don't mind my tax dollars going to that and free health care. So that's how I feel. That's what I think.
I mean, Wife says I need to be nicer to people who disagree, so I'm gonna try that real quick. You say there should be some sort of time limit on it, but this is after you laid out some people, the elderly, the disabled. What if you're disabled? Should there be a time limit on it?
Absolutely not. If you're obviously, there are going to be exceptions. They are not able-bodied. Someone who is 80 years old, no, they're not going to go to work full time. But you also have to take into account minimum wage in Texas is not livable. And you have, again, these families, these moms, these dads, both who are working full time, if not more than full time. And because of the cost of living, inflation, and our minimum wage, for some people who are trying, who aren't lazy, sucking off the government, this is just, you know what I mean? You know what I mean, and that's fine. But
no, I mean, I get it, but now we're getting into the minimum wage discussion, and I don't know. I just cringe at the term livable wage. There's millions of people that have minimum wage right now. All of them are alive. They're not dying. I was on minimum wage for my first couple of jobs. I lived. Minimum wage is definitely a living wage, but that's a different discussion for a different day. But that's Janelle in Fort Worth. 800-288-9227. I have a couple callers left, and I want to give you some details on our next James Show remote where you can come out and see the show live. Coming up next on News Talk 820 93.3 FM WBAP. Man, I don't know how true this is, but if this is true, this is some eye-opening stuff.
40 pounds on them over the average working American. If you took the average person that's on SNAP getting free food, and the average person that gets no free food from the government, the average female who gets no free food from the government is 146 pounds. The average SNAP recipient is 211 pounds. So is it a food?
This is our case point.
I know. First off, we talk about going hungry. Nobody could benefit from a nice fast more than the SNAP recipients.
All right, if that's true, that is the wildest stat I've heard all day. This is Melinda and Forney. You're on WBAP.
Hello, how are you?
Great, go ahead.
So I have a different perspective, and it's kind of along the lines of the last lady that called in about the elderly.
Yes.
And the disabled. I'm 58. My husband is 58, and we're both disabled. I was a manager at a law firm, and I made really good money before I got a brain injury and a brain bleed from a car wreck. So now I'm on disability, and I bring in about $30,000, and that's it. And my husband, who is also disabled from a 20-foot fall off of a ladder onto concrete that injured his back, and he cannot work. So we are not users or abusers of the system. However, workers' comp would not take care of his back. They kept, they kept putting him off and putting him off. He applied for disability. And
okay, but Melinda, why couldn't we do the same thing through a private voluntary donation charity?
Well, I can tell you that we don't qualify for SNAP, but we get.
I'm not talking about government programs. I'm saying what if we didn't have all these government programs as how society dealt with people in your situation, and we turned it back over to the private sector just like it used to be until LBJ?
Well, I would agree with that. I don't necessarily care about SNAP. I don't qualify for it. We get food from the food pantry. But in regards to health care, I have Medicare. My husband does not, because when they denied him, he just gave up.
All right. I got to run. Melinda, thank you for sharing your story here. James Parker and the James Show, we're going on the road to the National Medal of Honor Museum for a live broadcast November 11th. In fact, the whole WBAP crew is going to be there. Casey's going to be broadcasting live from 9 to 11. Then the morning show with Hal J. and Ernie and Carla and Monty. They're going to be available for a meet and greet at the table while Markley Van Camp and Robbins is on between Casey and myself, and then I'll be doing my show live at that same table from 2 to 5. So come on out. It's that new building in Arlington right next to the Cowboy Stadium, the one on stilts. It's the National Medal of Honor Museum, and we'll be doing live broadcasts there from WBAP in honor of Veterans Day. Stick around. Mark Levin's coming up next. I'm James Parker. This has been The James Show on News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM WBAP.
The James Show Podcast.